A guten Erev Shabbos. Tisha B'Av starts after Shabbat. It is our national day of grief and mourning. The whole thing began small, as big things usually do, with our own lack of self awareness, our own willingness to see the worst rather than see the best. The origin story of Tisha B'Av we learned just a few weeks ago in Parshat Shalach, where spies were sent into the land of Israel to see how to conquer it. They came back after 40 days of reconnaissance with a bad report. Lo nuchal la'alois. We will not be able to do it. We're not up to the task. The job is too great for us. Woe is us. As a result, we wandered in the desert for 40 years until we had expunged the slave mentality from our souls. Since that time, the day that the spies came back with their ill report, the ninth day of the month of Av, became, as Rashi and Medrash say, a day of Bechia Ladoros, a day of lamenting and weeping for generations. The ninth day of the month of Av later in history marked the day of destruction of both temples in Jerusalem, the fall of Beitar in the Bar Kokhba revolt, which ended Jewish self-governance in Israel for 19 centuries, the Spanish expulsion, the Nuremberg laws, and in 2005, the forced evacuation from Gush Katif, if you want to go there. So, on Saturday night after Shabbat, we will read the book of Eicha, Lamentations. It's one of the 5 Megillas that we read through the course of the year. This time, no need to wear your costume or bring your gragers like when we read Megillat Esther. This is not that. Or maybe one day it will be. The word Eicha means how. How does the city sit desolate? That's what our text at hand, how it begins. And it's actually in the Torah reading for Shabbat, in Parshas Devarim, the first Parsha in Deuteronomy, in the second Aliyah. Eicha esa levadi. How can I alone carry your contentiousness, your burdens, your quarrels? In some shows they read that with the Eicha trope, but we don't like to show even a bit of mourning on Shabbat. We're faced with a choice of how to read this sad book of Lamentations and the Kinos, the elegiac poems we'll read together on Saturday night and Sunday morning. We can read them as lamentation, or we can read them as rebuke. Lamentation means, oh, woe is us, how terrible these things are that befell us over time. Rebuke, by contrast, is a move toward improvement, toward change, and hopefully change for the better. In other words, we can read these words and really experience Tisha B'Av next week as pessimistic or as optimistic. The choice lies with us. And it's articulated in Eicha Rabbah, the greater Medrash on Eicha, the book of Lamentations itself. Rabbi Yehuda argues in the Midrash that Eicha means rebuke. How could you do it? How could you let that happen? With a view towards what steps would you need to take? What precautions can you adopt to avoid repeating the same mistakes of history over and over again? The prophets of Israel rebuke us in order to help us set our course more faithfully and authentically. Rebuke is a positive thing when viewed in that light. It doesn't always feel very good to be rebuked, but deep down, it expresses an optimism that things can change for the better. That's one approach. Another view taken by Rebbe Nehemiah is that Eicha means lament. How? How could it be? Eicha is oy lecha, woe unto you. Lamentation is fundamentally pessimistic. It signals that the present is a direct outcome of the mistakes of the past, and all we can do is weep and mourn and suffer the loss. My Rosh Yeshiva from Israel, Harav Dov Begun from Machon Meir in Yerushalayim, writes that Tisha B'Av must be taken as a rebuke, meaning in the optimistic light. He writes, we must engage in national and individual soul searching. We must repent in our relationship to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and we must rid ourselves of the weakness and lack of faith in our ability to conquer the land. We must become stronger and more courageous. Furthermore, he argues, we must search our souls regarding our relationship with our fellow, on the plane of the individual, the family, and the community. We must rid ourselves of all groundless hatred. We must love our fellow and our people, each and every individual Jew within the nation that God lovingly chose. His contention is that by removing the causes of Tisha B'Av, we can transform the negative spirit of the day into something very positive. Rav Begun concludes his Tisha B'Av essay with this. He says, despite everything, we believe and we are certain that our troubles are a momentary phenomenon and our redemption will last forever. Our suffering shall not rob us of our sanity or our faith. He's actually echoing the words of Maimonides in a letter to the Jews of Spain. The Muslim rulers in those times had issued harsh decrees, and the Rambam said, let our suffering not drive us mad. Let us recall that our covenant is eternal and irrevocable. Let us find consolation and become stronger in our faith, as it says, gladden us in proportion to the days wherein you have afflicted us, the years where we have seen evil. And one of God's days equals 1,000 years of joy, as we recently learned in Perek Chelik of Sanhedrin. Sfas Emes notes that our generation is mentioned as seeing the rebuilding of the temple in our times, not just once, but twice in the Siddur every day. Baruch atah Hashem, Bonei Yerushalayim. Blessed are you, God, who is building Jerusalem as we speak. Once in the Amidah, once in the Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals. We say it all the time. Now we just have to live it. Nesivas Shalom says that the mourning and the rebuke are actually one and the same. Our mourning for the temple is actually a powerful factor in its rebuilding. It is, he says, the mortar binding together the stones of the future temple. There's a wonderful irony in this, he writes, and great hope, and our challenge each year during the whole 3 weeks, especially on Tisha B'Av. Shabbat Shalom, and may we all together see much better days ahead.